The human raised her hand. Every predator in the arena sat down beside their young. The Galactic Council had seen many species rise and fall across the stars, but none had prepared them for humanity. When the humans first arrived at the Council's headquarters on Xanthar Prime, the assembled delegates had regarded them with the typical mixture of curiosity and condescension, reserved for newly spacefaring civilizations. They were soft-bodied, relatively weak, and possessed no natural weapons to speak of. The Crithians had their acid sacs, the Vorath their armored hides, and the insectoid Skrell their paralyzing venom. Humans had only their cleverness and an unsettling tendency to smile when threatened. Lena Castellanos stood in the center of the grand arena, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. The arena was a colossal structure, carved from a single piece of obsidian-like stone, with viewing platforms rising in concentric circles above her. Thousands of alien eyes watched from those platforms, representatives from over 300 species, all gathered to witness what the Council called the Proving. Every species that sought full membership in the Galactic Council had to undergo the Proving. It was a test of courage, adaptability, and wisdom. The Council would release into the arena the most dangerous predators from various worlds, and the candidate would have to survive for one solar rotation without weapons, without armor, without technology. Most species sent their greatest warriors. Humanity had sent Lena, a wildlife biologist from Earth's northern territories. The first gate groaned open and something massive emerged from the shadows. A Verask Alpha, easily 3 meters tall at the shoulder, its 6 legs carrying a body built like a living tank. Its mouth opened to reveal rows of crystalline teeth designed to crush through starship hull plating. The creature had been starved for 3 days. The crowd leaned forward in anticipation. Lena didn't run. She stood perfectly still, her hands visible at her sides, her posture relaxed. The Verask charged, its roar shaking dust from the arena walls. In the Council's observation deck, Tarek of the Vorath Commonwealth shifted his considerable bulk. As the Council's master of trials, he had overseen hundreds of provings. He had seen candidates torn apart, frozen in fear, or crushed beneath claws and teeth. But something about the human stillness troubled him. It wasn't the stillness of fear. It was something else entirely. The Verask closed the distance in seconds, but just as it reached Lena, she moved, not away, but forward and to the side, placing herself alongside the creature's massive head. Her hand came up not in a strike but in a slow, deliberate gesture. She touched the Verask's neck, just behind its jaw, and began to make a sound, a low, rhythmic hum that resonated in her chest. The Verask stopped. Its massive head swung toward her, confusion evident in its 3 black eyes. Lena continued the sound, her hand moving in slow circles. Then she did something that made the entire Council gasp. She sat down on the arena floor, cross-legged, completely vulnerable. And she raised her other hand, palm up, in an invitation. The Verask circled her once, twice, its nostrils flaring. Then, incredibly, it lowered itself to the ground beside her, its massive head resting within reach of her hand. "Impossible," Tarek muttered, his translator struggling to convey his shock. "The Verask are apex predators. They know no fear, no submission. What is she doing?" His aide pulled up data on her holographic display. "Ambassador, humans have a recorded history of domesticating predators. They call them pets, but this is something else. She's using infrasonic frequencies and touch to trigger calming responses." Over the next several hours, the Council released more predators. Each time the pattern repeated. A Skrell hunter approached with murderous intent. She stood her ground, made herself small, and waited. When it struck, she moved with precision, avoiding the venomous stingers, and touched a specific spot on its thorax. The Skrell's aggression drained away. Within minutes, it rested beside the Verask. A pack of Rothian razor wolves circled her. Lena identified the pack leader and addressed it directly. She mimicked its postures, its vocalizations. She established herself not as prey, not as a threat, but as something the razor wolves' instincts couldn't quite categorize, something that might be Peck. They too settled beside her. By the time the sun began to set on Xanthar Prime, Lena sat surrounded by a dozen of the galaxy's most feared predators, all of them calm, all of them resting. But it was what happened next that would be spoken of in council chambers for generations. The final gate opened, and a Kreshnak juvenile emerged, mewling pitifully. Kreshnaks were among the most aggressive species in known space, but this one was young, barely old enough to have left its mother. It had been separated from its parent for the trial, and it was terrified. Lena slowly stood. Every being in the arena tensed. The human walked toward the Kreshnak juvenile, her movements careful, non-threatening. She knelt before it and began to sing. Not the humming she'd used before, but actual words in her native language, soft and gentle, a lullaby her grandmother had sung to her as a child. The Kreshnak juvenile's defensive spines lowered. It crept forward and pressed its scaled head against Lena's chest. She wrapped her arms around it, still singing. That's when the arena's emergency doors burst open. The Kreshnak matriarch, driven mad by separation from her offspring, had broken through 3 security barriers. She was massive, easily twice the size of the Verisk Alpha, and she was in a killing rage. "Hold fire," Tarek commanded, though he didn't know why. The matriarch saw her juvenile in Lena's arms and charged. The other predators rose, positioning themselves between Lena and the threat, but Lena called out to them. They sat. Lena stood slowly, still holding the juvenile. She walked toward the matriarch, not away. When she was close enough to feel the heat of the matriarch's breath, Lena raised her hand. The same gesture she'd made hours ago. She carefully placed the juvenile on the ground between them. The young Kreshnak ran to its mother, and the matriarch's rage melted into relief. She scooped up her offspring with one massive claw, and then she lowered her head to Lena in what could only be described as gratitude. Lena raised her hand again and touched the matriarch's scaled snout. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're both okay now." The matriarch made a sound, low and rumbling, and then she sat, right there in the arena, with her juvenile curled against her side. And every other predator in that space sat down as well, not in submission, not in defeat, but in recognition, trust, protection, family. In the observation deck, Tarek found his voice. "How?" he asked. His aide pulled up more data, her eyes wide. "Ambassador, humans evolved alongside apex predators. They didn't just survive them. They befriended them. They brought wolves into their caves and turned them into dogs. Humans possess an almost supernatural ability to read and communicate with other species young. They call it empathy. And they extend it not just to their own kind, but to anything they perceive as vulnerable." Tarek watched as Lena sat surrounded by creatures that should have torn her apart. The Kreshnak juvenile had wandered over to her, and she was scratching behind its auditory ridges. "That's not a survival strategy," he said quietly. "That's something else entirely." "Yes," his aide agreed. "Humans don't just survive hostile environments. They make them less hostile. They find connections between beings and strengthen them. They protect the vulnerable, even when those vulnerable ones will one day become predators themselves." The council voted unanimously to grant humanity full membership. But more than that, they asked Lena to remain as humanity's first ambassador. Her first official act was to reunite all the arena predators with their natural habitats and families. As she prepared to leave the arena that night, the Kreshnak matriarch followed her to the gate. Lena turned, smiled, and raised her hand one final time. The matriarch raised her own massive claw in response, mimicking the gesture. Humanity had passed the proving. But the galaxy was only beginning to understand what that meant.